Effect Andromeda was finally released and has so far been receiving some mixed reviews over its content, with many gamers calling out the title for its terrible animations and graphics that leave something left to be desired. Personally, I haven't played Mass Effect Andromeda, but I have definitely seen a few videos and images that prove this sentiment. I've been paying quite close attention to the discussion of the quality of the title's graphics and animations, and it kind of got me thinking about a few questions. Firstly, particularly in relation to graphical and animation quality, how much are gamers willing to compromise in terms of quality in this area to provide a greater gameplay or narrative experience? I wouldn't really say that BioWare is really a publisher that I associate with providing games with cutting edge graphics or animations. To be honest, most of the publishers that produce large scale RPG games do often seem to make a compromise in that area, and this is a rather accepted notion within the gaming industry. It takes a few years for developers such as Bethesda, BioWare, or even CD Projekt Red now to create titles on a scale of Fallout 4, Dragon Age Inquisition, or The Witcher 3. So often, perhaps developers do begin by creating a new title with the decision to use the best graphics they are capable of achieving at that time, but they then become outdated by the time the title is actually released. It's also important to remember that the developers of most RPGs aren't really focused on providing gamers with titles that have cutting edge graphics, but rather a worthwhile experience that you feel extremely excited to engage in. Most people who play a Fallout or an Elder Scrolls game do so to explore the world and discover all of its secrets. The most common running joke with regards to the Elder Scrolls series is the fact that players keep on ignoring the main quest to go explore their surroundings. BioWare has created a very well accepted reputation for themselves that their games are strongly narrative based experiences. Gamers play Mass Effect or Dragon Age to watch the story unfold more than anything else, and this story often takes several hours to tell. However, although most gamers have come to accept that not all RPGs will have the best graphics or animations, I do think that there are certain standards that we have come to expect. Are the animations within Mass Effect Andromeda below these standards? Maybe, but I'll say from what I've seen, I'd still be able to have a good time laughing at a lot of the character interactions while playing the game, which unfortunately may not actually have been the intention with those animations. Secondly, does our expectation change on the basis of the publisher and the genre or nature of the title in question? The idea that developers are treated differently is one that I have contemplated quite a bit over the past few years, particularly after the release of Assassin's Creed Unity, after which many gamers took to social media platforms to voice their complaints about the glitchy mess of a game that the title was on release. One significant aspect I remember about the discussion surrounding the title was that in a few common threads, some gamers, although highly disappointed by the fact that Unity was largely pretty much broken, did point out that whenever Bethesda released a new Elder Scrolls or Fallout game, there wasn't all of this outcry despite the fact that many of their games are often released with terrible bugs. I personally remember playing Skyrim on my Xbox 360 and going through the Waking Nightmare Daedric quest and the game crashing if it autosaved, which became quite a problem as I was struggling to prevent the game from saving when I brought up the character menu to change my weapon. This wasn't even the only time that I had encountered such a glitch while playing the game, as there were many occasions where I opened the door to a new room and fell through the air into eternal nothingness, and had to hope that my last hard save wasn't about 3 hours ago. I myself, however, wasn't really able to provide an answer as to why I also seem to be okay with the fact that Bethesda has released games with such terrible glitches in the past, despite the fact that I have become very annoyed with some of them. Many gamers pointed out the fact that Bethesda generally makes massive games that takes years to finish, and thus some terrible glitches are to be expected on release, and that they will eventually deal with them, or at least the big ones. animations. Somehow, however, I do think that even if Ubisoft didn't book the Assassin's Creed franchise and release a new title every 3 or 4 years, people would have still been rather angry about Unity being released in such a state. This notion does seem to suggest that some developers are able to get away with some things that others would definitely not be able to. But what about BioWare, a developer that also tends to release games that take forever to finish and have a large scope? Perhaps many players would be more forgiving if Dragon Age Inquisition wasn't as successful as it was, in turn raising expectations for Mass Effect Andromeda. The other funny thing is that there wasn't really a problem with the character animations in Inquisition, or at least that I remember, and that does perhaps give some light to the argument that Andromeda was rushed. I think perhaps another point one really does have to look at is the fact that many gamers are criticizing the game for its somewhat lackluster story, despite it being a BioWare game. From my interpretation of first impressions, a lot of gamers don't really care for the narrative or think it's somewhat shallow, and this is a big problem for a developer that has a reputation that has been built on the fact that their games have some of the best narratives within the industry. Perhaps many gamers would be willing to forgo the fact that the game has terrible animations if it had the type of compelling narrative that we have come to expect from BioWare, but who knows? It's all dependent on each player, but I am going to say that it is a bit hard to watch a character speak about their dead father while smiling. I don't know how other people feel about that, but I don't particularly think that it's such a great animation. So what do you think? Do the animations and graphics within Mass Effect Andromeda bother you? Do you think that different developers are held to different standards and that it is right to do this? Please share in the comments down below. And if you like this video, please remember to subscribe for more. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.